We put together an annual schedule of all the things that need to happen when. And we talked about sort of a template and what we needed to include in workflow outlines, both for sort of the day of the market and also through the season. And those we're working on as the season goes, as we start gearing up. Those we're putting together now. And then all of these things went into a packet for new board members, which I'm going to show now. Okay, are you seeing this now in my document? Yes, okay. So we put together this sort of all these documents into one place so that when somebody comes onto the board, they can see all of these things. Um, the charter is the one that took us the most time to put together. And you can see, and this is available as a template now for everybody through OFMA. So I'm not going to go through it in a ton of detail, but we sort of outlined what our board looks like, what our meetings, what the process is for those, the process for decision making, and then the structure with officers and board member responsibilities, and then what our committees look like. And then this is what our calendar looks like. Super basic, but you can see it has all the things so that every month when we meet, we can go through and look at like, are these things happening or have they happened already? And then what needs to be done, sort of looking into the next few months. And then there's also, as you can see, a whole bunch of other documents that we put in here. The job description for a market manager. These are where our workflows will go as we write these during the season. Um, how we get sponsors, the schedule for social media posts, all those types of things we put into one place here. So now that we have this, our hope is that this sort of clearer outline of what we do and when we do it and how these things happen makes it easier for new board members who are coming on to see how we work and to have some idea of where they might fit themselves in or what they're interested in taking on, and if that's taking on some of the responsibilities that board members are currently doing, or to take on new projects, what that might look like. And we think that especially for people who don't have a lot of experience on the boards of nonprofits, that this is going to be really useful in making them feel welcome and making them feel like they understand how it goes and what we're supposed to be doing. So ultimately, we're hoping that this leads to recruitment and retention of new board members, and that all of our lives get a little easier, and that we can keep the market going. And so if you are thinking about this process or in the middle of this process, I want to emphasize it took a really long time and it was actually a surprising amount of work. And what we really found is that we knew everything that needed to go into these documents, and we sort of knew what our final document should look like. But what the consultant helped us to do was to really refine that. She was great at like asking us a prompt, listening to our responses, and then helping us get it condensed into a format that would be uh, more usable for people who don't already exist in sort of the collective board brain. And so we had tried to do things similar to this in the past on our own, and um, and we really struggled, and it didn't happen. And I think some of that is just the objective time commitment that you have to make when you have a consultant that you're paying. And some of it was the consultant's expertise in drawing us out on the things that we know but didn't really think about actively knowing, if that makes sense. If you've been on a board for a long time, there's a lot of information that lives in your head. And I also think that in hindsight, we should have identified one person on our board who is sort of going to be in charge of doing all of this, because a lot of our work we just do sort of fully collaboratively, and we don't have a real hierarchical structure on the board. Um, but this was a big project, and we should have just identified from the start one person who was going to um, be in charge of scheduling and organizing and making sure the drafts became final and things like that. So I would recommend that to anyone who's thinking about taking on this sort of project. And that's it that I have for a presentation. And I'm have some other board members here, and I'm really happy to answer any questions or look at any of the documents we made in more detail or whatever people might find useful.
Well, I have a question. I was curious, what kind of consultant you used and how you found them, and if you applied any DEI lens to this work.
Great question. We found the consultant who is a specialist in working with nonprofits through OFMA. So, yeah, Amanda can probably answer a little bit more about how these consultants were sort of matched up to markets, but we did not go out searching for the consultant ourselves. Um, None of us really know much about that, and that would have been really hard to find ourselves. So I'm glad that we had OFMA on that. And in terms of applying a DEI lens, I think that and other board members feel free to speak up on this too. But I think our goal specifically is that we think that having this kind of documentation makes our board more equitable and accessible because we were finding difficulties in retaining board members without board experience, and some of those people were um, of ethnic minorities or cultural minorities. Um, they didn't have board experience and they didn't feel confident in really like jumping in. And so our hope is that having everything lined out makes it more accessible sort of to anybody without previous board experience or without other leadership opportunities, and that this board can really be a place where people can gain that kind of experience in a welcoming way. And so we think that just having these documents puts us more in that position. But we didn't in terms of sorry, I'm thinking and talking at the same time, so it's a little hard. But I think that we, in terms of making the documentation itself, we were trying to put down what happens to make the market run. And I wouldn't say that there was specifically a DEI lens into putting this documentation together, other than what already exists in the way that we have tried to put our market together and for our market to function in an equitable way.
I would actually like to add to that. We had a board member who left our board who I think was, really feeling that they were actually at our market. They were a vendor, so local businesswoman, black-owned business, and she was on the board. And the work she was doing was great, but like she really it in talking to her and seeing the interactions and sort of evaluating the interactions among ourselves, like it's very hard for someone to step into this group of people who's just like really scrappy and is just like, oh, whatever, I'll just do something or try something, it all feels very on the spur and ad hoc, and it's really hard to find a way to fit yourself in there. And I think you know, we've also talked about there's like this aspect of like, white middle and upper middle class culture where you just like, whatever, I'll just try it. And if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. I'll just do my best and it'll have to be good enough. That is, less prevalent in a lot of other cultures, right? It can be uncomfortable to be in a new situation like on a board and just kind of throw yourself out there and be like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but it'll all work out in the end. So that was sort of top of mind, I think, when we were putting together this document and going over this process. That specific experience, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see a question in the chat too. Do you post these documents on your website? And I think some of them will. The charter will definitely go on the website. But other things are sort of just for the board, in that not necessarily that they're private, and we'll definitely be sharing these things with anyone who has an interest in joining the board so they can sort of see how we work, and if they're if it's really something they'd be interested in. But I don't think a lot of the documents need to go on the website for the public who doesn't sort of have an otherwise strong interest in how the board functions. And that's again, like, not to keep it. It's available for anyone who asks, and it will be available certainly to the neighborhood association as our fiscal sponsor. But I just think a lot of it's not of general interest to our vendors or our customers at the market. Um, and then I see another in the chat. You mentioned that the board was small and tired at the beginning of this process. So I know we're not the only board who feels that way. Have you noticed a big change since going through the process? New members, new energy. So we are just now starting to recruit new board members as sort of the market season starts. So we'll see in terms of if we're meeting our goals for recruitment and retention of new board members. But I do feel like having the budget process sort of streamlined and with a consistent reporting format, and then also having that calendar makes things more organized and more streamlined for the board in our sort of like regular functioning. So I think we're already benefiting from not spending time at meetings trying to remember all of the things that need to happen in the April meeting, but just going to that calendar and making sure that everything that's happening is what's supposed to be happening, and if we're missing something. So I think that that's been helpful and sort of confidence building for the board as it already exists. And then, did someone really have to advocate for this project to get off the ground, or was everyone in agreement that it needed to be done? I would say that everyone was in agreement. I don't know if other board members want to step in, but when we, yeah, Justin's nodding. When we had this opportunity from OFMA to do a project, and we sort of tossed around a bunch of different ideas, and this was really just the idea that we kept coming back to, that we felt like it was kind of at the root of a lot of our problems. In terms of being able to expand sort of the goals of the market. So I don't feel like there was a huge debate about it. It was just hard for everyone to make the time, I think was the biggest challenge. I see a question. I have a question about board member roles and responsibilities. Did you do any work around defining those boundaries aside from the market manager position description? Um, that's a great question. I don't know if anyone else wants to. I feel like we're still sort of in the process of refining that and filling that out. And I think that some of that will happen as we bring in new board members. But I don't know if Justin wants to jump in.
Yeah, there's certainly a few roles that are kind of set. Um, we have the head of the board who doesn't really have any assigned duties other than like making sure that all the meetings, go out on time and get scheduled, and have appropriate documentation on them. Keith, who's on the call, has been doing a great job as our sort of financial point person. So that's a definite role that's defined. And the other responsibilities are primarily kind of divvied up into two sort of committees. We're a board of 6 people, so what really is a committee, but one sort of focuses more on the day-to-day operations of the board, and the other one sort of focuses on grants and outreach, connections with the community, things like that. So we're sort of like two small swarms on two very big I guess roles. So like because we're small and scrappy, we have to be really agile. Like we have to break it down more generally like that. But yes, so that there are roles, but it's a little bit more loose than like super specific board roles.
Yeah, but on that, I think a thing that we need to do, and maybe put this on the calendar or in some other places, that um, we do sort of have tasks that we like. I do the street closure permit every year. Mayan does the double up food bucks every year. And that's it. We do that because it's easy. It's easier because I've been doing it forever and I know how to do it. But I think it is something that should be included in that, like, it's not a specific task for me as a board member, but it is a task that I do as a board member, maybe to make it more clear for new people, sort of how things are assigned, would probably be beneficial. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I don't know if other people want to jump in. Is succession planning part of your process? Ooh, that's a great question. And I would say not yet. It's a little bit hard to think about at this point because the board is small and we've been working together for a long time and we're all friends. Um, but also I think that some of us, I'm sure I'm not speaking for myself, and that some of us feel like it's hard to think about leaving the board at this point because we would be leaving the market in such a bad position if any of us left at this point, that we have to really get more board members before we can think about that. Although maybe succession planning is something that you think about before you have enough people to do it. I don't know. I would say it's not been part of it so far, but it's a thing I'd like to think about. What is the time commitment for joining your board? Um, yeah, we usually tell prospective board members that um, we meet once a month and our meetings are 2 hours, and that everybody is sort of expected to take on other tasks. So one of those can be volunteering at the market on Saturdays because we need a certain number of experienced people who know what's going on to be at the market with our market manager. But we also have people who can't come on Saturdays regularly to the market and don't volunteer at the market, and they sort of take on other tasks. So it's there's not like a set commitment. We don't require a certain number of hours other than making most of our monthly meetings. But if somebody can't come on Saturdays to volunteer, we're sort of hoping that they come with some other idea about how they can support the market, and what that might look like. Um, okay, so we are not our own 501(c)(3). We are under the Woodlawn Neighborhood Association as our fiscal sponsor, which is why we have a charter instead of bylaws, because a charter is more flexible and we aren't legally required to have bylaws since we're not our own nonprofit. And I see a question. I missed the presentation. What is your business structure? And I honestly don't really know what that means. I'm not a business person.
Hi, it was my question. You already answered it.
Oh, okay.
You explained that why you don't have a legal board, but and bylaws and all that stuff because you're under somebody else. But I just habitually checked everything under the business registry and didn't find you there, but that's why.
Yes.
So business structure could be, a nonprofit corporation under the state, or what what you are, or any number of things. There aren't very many for-profit markets in Oregon, so I wasn't thinking that.
I'll say if we were a for-profit market, we'd be failing pretty badly. So, yeah, okay. So that was a simpler question than I was thinking it was. So thank you.
There were also interested in hearing other markets' onboarding processes too. So this is a back and forth for everyone. So please jump in.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have to be the Aaron show. And I know that in the chat, some other people said that they were sort of in the process of working on some of this stuff, and I'd be curious to hear what other markets are doing, or if what I presented seems really different from what you're doing, or really rings true to your process. I would be interested in hearing that as well.
I can share if you all want from the perspective of Portland Farmers Market, that is a market that's been around probably one of the longest in the state. But when I joined, really didn't have a strong onboarding process. And through our new executive director, we now have a really great one. And so basically when we do get new board members, we do an in-person or Zoom session with the board chair and the executive director. And we go through the bylaws. We have a PowerPoint now that kind of explains everything, the bylaws, the history. Starts out with the story, of course, always put the story in there, to get them interested. We go over all the different committees that we have. So we have, pretty structured, parameters around board membership, the term lengths, what's included in it. We always ask people to serve on at least one committee. So we give the different committee options, and we have committees that meet every month. We have committees that only are ad hoc and meet when they have to meet. But it really helps to do this before the first board meeting that the new members attend. So they kind of have the history, the bylaws, kind of all the backstory, and they come into it feeling like they're educated, not feeling like they're coming into it blind.
I think that's really helpful because I know your organization is so much bigger than ours. So yeah, we sort of roughly have a couple committees, but like Justin said, we sort of swarm around two points rather than being more defined. But what we have always done, and I think that we will continue to do, is that when somebody is interested in joining the board, we invite them to come to a board meeting and see how it goes. And so hopefully that process is more welcoming now than it has been in the past, because I think our meetings are run a little bit differently now that we have um, this process and formatting. But I think you're right that having a meeting with them to go over some of this documentation and not just provide it, but to talk through it before they come to a board meeting would probably be really useful and helpful for people. Keith, did you want to add anything? I feel like you've been very quiet, but you were part of this process as well.
I think you did a nice job. It's hard to think of other things to mention. I think that the process was helpful for me. So I handle the finances, and the process was helpful for me in pushing us to have a little more, some more tools. We got some more tools, financial tools. I had a nice conversation with a couple other people who do finances at other markets, and during the process, so contacts was a good part of this process, right? Getting contacts to other organizations um, was really helpful. And I feel like everything we do is iterative, right? So like even this, I think, is something that we're gonna utilize, and then we're going to see what we need to change and add. I mean, even in the questions, people have asked some like had some good thoughts about things that we could consider. And I think that we should set up time. I think we talked about this, but we should set up a time yearly to sort of look at this and make adjustments, because the good news for us is that we have that power, so to speak, as a board to make those changes. So versus maybe a required structure, let's say, in some not-for-profits. So yeah, I mean, I think you did a nice job presenting it.
Thank you. Um, and I see, has this process been helpful with grant applications? Don't know yet, so we'll stay tuned on that as we some grants that we have been getting we're no longer eligible for, and so we're sort of looking for new things to apply to now. So I think that's we'll see. We'll see how that works out. And then can you share how you plan to evaluate the efficacy of your markets board documents? And I think that the real test of that is going to be whether we can recruit and retain new board members. And we've also talked about with new board members going go as we go through all of this and then asking them for feedback on what the process has been like. It's hard for because so many of our board members have been with the market sort of since it started. Um, we don't we never got onboarded. So we don't really have a good sense of what's helpful and what's not. And so I think as Keith said, this is a really iterative process, but I think that getting that feedback from the new board members we're hoping to bring on this year will be a big part of both refining the documents and evaluating how well we're doing with that. Um, and I see, does anybody on this call's board have a donation requirement or a get or give policy in place? We do not. We explicitly do not. I don't know if other boards want to jump in. And then I also see how easy it was getting sponsorship from local business. Um, one of the templates that's available now for everybody is our sponsorship packet that we put together. And we had some regular sponsorship from local businesses prior to COVID. We sort of put everything on hold in 2020 because our um, our neighborhood was really struggling, as were many other places. And so we've just now started ramping that up, and I would say so far we've been pretty successful in the number of businesses that we've presented that to and what we've been getting back. So I think that if you look at that packet, you'll see that there's like sort of a nice presentation, and there's a couple different sponsorship levels that sort of have different sorts of things with it. If you want, um, if you want specialized social media posts during the year, if you want to be on the banner, if you want to have your own banner, there's sort of options for all of that in the sponsorship packet, which makes it nice for local businesses to sort of pick where they want to be in that. Um, but I am not an expert in getting sponsors. That's not what I do.
So regarding the comment that get or give can intimidate potential board members, yeah, I think we've seen this firsthand, and that's one of the reasons why we decided not to do it. We had uh, was it like right after COVID, I think we had or maybe it was during COVID, we had a fundraising drive, and I think a lot of the board members decided to donate, and then some couldn't, and I think there was a real feeling of stress about not being able to donate. So yeah, I think we consciously made the effort to not want to do a donation requirement.
I think that experience is why it's explicitly in the charter.
Yeah.
That's not a requirement because, yeah, and certainly those of us who were donating didn't mean to feel coercive into making other people on the board donate. But, um, this is a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of money. Our elementary school has one of the highest rates of kids on free or reduced lunch in Portland Public Schools. And so it's a goal of ours to not have a board that represents the wealthiest portion of our neighborhood, but to have a board that um, represents the constituents of our neighborhood. And I think that requiring a donation would be a good way to not meet that goal. Um, I see. Can you tell us about the role technology plays in creating, documenting board materials with digital platforms to use to manage documents, and how does tech proficiency affect board engagement with online materials? Yeah, that's a great question. We have been doing everything in Google Drive. So this has been part of the process of documenting everything and getting everything organized was building a board drive structure that means that we can actually find the documents that we're looking for. And this is actually more challenging than I think that it should be, or that it feels like it should be. So we're working on that. Um, we we do require people to have internet access to be on the board, and I think that that's just I wish we didn't have to require that, but I don't see a way to make the board function efficiently if we can't use email and share share documents, but and I don't love the Google machine, but it is sort of the best available option to my knowledge to make a large number of documents accessible to a set number of people. So I don't know if other boards do things differently. I would love to hear about it if anybody else has found a better way to do it.
Hi, everyone. It's Kendra. I'm OFMA's Community Engagement Coordinator, and I just wanted to chime in and say that you're welcome to come off mute if you'd like to ask your question or to share more about your board's onboarding process, the digital tools you use to manage your documents. Maybe you're still printing documents out. How are you organizing and printing and archiving documents and sharing those? We have about 15 minutes left, so please use the space however you need to prepare your board to support you this season.
Yeah, I would love to hear how other boards are doing this because it's a thing that we have struggled with.
Hi, my name is Michelle Townsend. I'm Vice President for the Cave Junction Farmers Market, also on the OFMA Board of Directors. And one thing that we do on our board, I guess I'll just stop by saying we've been a board for 11 years. And so the process has changed. We have 11 board members. I think that I'd like to use the term adapting organically to the current needs of the population and the people we're serving, because that's also changed. We are a very rural, impoverished, generationally impoverished area. So I can identify with wanting to have the people on your board serving the needs of the community. We do have, although it's not a stiff requirement that we have on paper or in our bylaws, we definitely do have sort of an unspoken rule of expectation, I guess, that maybe comes with living in a rural area, that if you're going to be on a board, you're doing things for that board and for the community. And why would you want to be on the board or representing it if it wasn't just for your own interest in some way? So I think that the board expectation, although not a stiff one, is basically show up for the fundraisers. And, we definitely, this year we put on our requirements that you had to serve on at least one committee because people weren't doing that. We have 5 committees, and we have a board onboarding buddy. So basically, when you can sign up, when you sign up to be a board member, we got four new ones this year. You get to choose one of the other people that was there before you, so that maybe if you don't feel comfortable asking questions like to a large group of people, or like you don't understand how procedure works or voting, or just you've never been on a board before and you need someone to help hold your hand and like kind of walk you through the process, that's what the boarding buddy is for. So that's been working well. I'm 2 people's boarding buddies on my board, and I get a lot of questions about like how do you send out, and some people don't know how to use Google Drive. Some people have never had the opportunity to do that before. So, I think that it might be an embarrassment factor on their part. And so we just kind of help each other out. And as far as making documents available all in one spot, we have a hybrid. We have our market manager's basket that she carries with her everywhere that has like all of our source documents and bylaws and things to give out to other people. Our communications form that we adopted last year, so people had a place to complain directly on paper. And then we have a link on our website that people can complain on there too. The communication complaint form. That's been really helpful to streamline things. But basically every year we have 4 people. We have 6 people that have been on the board, and then we have 4 people that we replace every year. And we can't seem to figure out what it takes to engage the people, like the new people, and get them to stay. So everybody has their own unique problems, and it's been very exciting to come to this meeting today and hear everybody's different struggles. And I thank you guys, and thank you, OFMA, for having this meeting.
I love that board buddy idea so much. I think that's a great idea. And I think you're right that, especially with people who don't have board or leadership experience, or you're right, even with the technology, I think that it would be more welcoming to not have to express all of that in front of the entire board and to be able to just have one person that you're like, oh, I have a dumb question I need to ask. Would make it a lot more inclusive, I think. I think that's a great idea that we should implement.
Yeah, I really like that too. I guess because I have worked in government a lot, I started out with some bad expectations of people's understanding of governance. And that's been a learning experience for me I should have known. I think that people aren't born knowing this stuff. That wasn't reasonable. And I, I guess a good example of something that I was very surprised that a board member said is, why don't we have all the employees, so everybody that works at the market come and be at the board meetings all the time? And I don't know why they said that, but we pay those people. They're not volunteers, and we have, a chain of command, but I took for granted that somebody would understand that that's not how the board works, and there's always surprises like that. And so I just have to adjust my viewpoints.
I think that's such a good point. And especially like for us, because we've all worked together for so long on the board, um, that it's hard for us to understand what other people don't know who aren't already on the board. Um, and so I want to reach a point where we have a good balance of being able to bring in people who don't have that, but also to be open to questions like that. The board has never done it in that way because all of us on the board sort of came. I mean, I think most everybody on the board came with some experience in serving on the board of a nonprofit, even though we are not our own nonprofit, but it's a similar process. And so I also want us to. I think part of bringing in our community and more representatives from our community is to be open to those kinds of questions. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. But for us to be able um, to hear those things in good faith, I guess, is and to think about those things from new perspectives is one of our goals as a board in onboarding new members.
I think I want to chime in here. One challenge I think that we have too is because we're a relatively small board, time commitments can sometimes get a little out of hand. Um, with how much we have to do and think about this stuff. And we want to be able to bring people on so that those time commitments are less, but you're in this situation where you bring a new person on and like they see all the work that's being done and like they see the time commitment and they're like, I don't really want to commit that much time. And so they leave. Um, it's hard to like, okay, we're bringing you on so that we can make those time commitments less. Um, but in the interim, there's still a lot of time commitment required. So I think that's a thing we're struggling with as a small board, um, and as a small board who is doing a lot, it's a little burnt out. It's like you bring people on and like, well, I don't really want to get to the point where I'm like them, in some ways, but yeah, I think that's a struggle we've been having, certainly.
Well, and then also that when so much energy goes into sort of keeping the lights on, it doesn't feel like anybody on the board has a lot of bandwidth to do a lot of onboarding or a really involved training process for new board members. And so um, that was part of the goal of some of this documentation, is to do some of that lift for us so that we can bring more people on, and an overall, or the individual workload becomes less, but we have to invest in making that happen.
Hi, this is Malia from Klamath Falls. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Um, I am curious as to what a type of people you look for as board members. Are you recruiting the producers and the ranchers, or maybe the artisans? I mean, who are you looking for? And keeping equity in the lens, obviously, but what where do your best new board members come from?
Great question. A little hard to answer because we haven't had new board members in a long time. So this is part of our underlying problem. And so I think that that's something that we are working on figuring out. And we have not had a ton of success in recruiting and retaining vendors at our market to be board members. We feel like that would be ideal to have some vendor representation, but a lot of our vendors um, are also very short of time and don't live in the neighborhood or near the neighborhood. So right now our board is made of people who live in Woodlawn or in neighboring neighborhoods where Woodlawn is their main farmers market. And we, are looking, I think, most actively for more people in the community, people who are interested in the market and come to the market and care about the market. But getting some vendor representation on the board is a thing that we've talked a lot about and are still actively working on how we might make that happen.
Yeah. And in the past, we've had that representation. I think on the original board we had Luke and Lily, right, from Little Starts. They were sort of cornerstone farm vendors at our market. And then Vanessa, who was a person in the community and a vendor at our market, which was great. And yeah, I think we are less for having lost that sort of representation, right? It's like getting that sort of perspective is really important. I think we're missing that right now.
I mean, also some of that too is that our market is kind of an incubator market, in that a lot of our vendors outgrow us. Um, and that's great. That's a thing that we hope for if that's their goal is to become a bigger business. But it does make in terms of having people long enough at the market that they feel like they would be interested in joining the board, a bit of a challenge as well.
Michelle Townsend, Cape Junction Farmers Market here. I would just like to say that we have designated roles for our board members. We have one community position where you have to live here in the Illinois Valley, but don't have to be directly involved in the market. And the rest of our 10 positions on our board, you have to either be a vendor, a farmer, a musician, somebody who is directly involved in the market itself. And I feel like that right now we probably are a little vendor heavy. We probably have 6 or 7 vendors on our board, but the person that isn't involved in the board, I feel is very in the market itself, being on the board, I feel it's very important because they don't have anything to lose or gain from any of the decisions they make, and it creates like a complete non-biased person. So that really works out well for us.
I definitely see where that would be an advantage, but I also feel like it would be a challenge for us to find somebody who is willing to commit time to come to meetings if they don't already have an interest in the ongoingness of the market. And then also in terms of um, recruiting new board members, I will say that my highest priority is bringing people onto the board who are willing to do some of the work to make the market happen every week. Um, so I see that as an ideal, and I really like that ideal, but it's also something that I feel like has to be further down the road for us. Although I think if we had somebody come who was that was their position, then I think they would be welcome on the board if they wanted to commit the time to the market to the board, but not to the market. That would be okay. Um, and actually, I would say that we have had in the past board members who sort of more or less fit that description, but they don't retain interest in coming to the board meetings. Um, so they don't stay on the board. And we're such a small board, and it's not just the size of our board, but also the fact that that the board is largely running the market itself every week. That, to some extent, like we don't beggars can't be choosers. We can't set a ton of positions that we're going to be required to fill on our board if we don't think we're going to be able to fill those positions.
A vendor, I've led a vendor board for a long time, and they have pros and cons. Certainly you have to accommodate your board meetings to when it isn't good farming weather. So we often are shifting the time that our meetings start to accommodate the farmers. We had a restaurant vendor on a couple years ago, and she really struggled with the farmer vendors because she wanted to meet during the day and they wanted nothing to do with that at all. We kept up with Zoom for a long time as our only method of having board meetings. Starting obviously during the pandemic, main part, but we're now into hybrid because the farmers actually sometimes prefer to, and it's a different person each time they sometimes prefer that methodology. So we're having in-person Zoom hybrids, and that seems to be where we're going to be for a while.
So thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks again, Woodlawn Farmers Market, for being so honest and transparent and vulnerable about your experience, trying to kind of revive your board's energy by documenting your processes. And we hope we'll see you all soon.
Thanks for giving us a place to share, and hopefully we can help someone not reinvent the wheel in the future if this is a process they need to go through. So thank you.